Welcome to Complex Creatures, exploring spirituality and the common good.
The world we live in today is incredibly polarized. And people pointed out it's almost a banal observation. In fact, I get a sense from reading Pew Research and articles, whether it's liberal or progressive or conservative media, that people are more and more concerned that there's going to be this divide within our own country that, it's akin, people talk about the threat of a civil war. The language is there, the thought is there, the feeling is there. I think history shows that we were more divided at other times, but certainly we do feel disconnected. And so it's hard to navigate. It's hard to feel like we can make any hay in this world or build a world for the 21st century together. And in fact, that's one of the things that we're still trying to figure out. As we've all entered into this 21st century, after the collapse of two towers and countless wars, we are still asking a question of what is this world going to be that we're building together? And things have just rapidly changed in terms of our technological ability. The advent of AI and the emergence of how it's growing has got us all on our heels, asking ourselves questions about how we will make use of it. Will it get so bad as that it makes use of us? And we're still asking the question. It's an anxious question. What kind of world will we make together? Maybe we don't phrase it like that, but it's really the question that's undergirding a lot of the anxieties. And it makes me think about the fundamental sense of spirituality, and that is the longing for connection. In fact, when I hear people say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, I take that to mean one of a couple things. I think it means in some sense that the person is not interested in an institution or a group of people practicing a faith, but that there's still something that they want. They may want to have some sort of belief in a divinity or a god or goddess or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they also, more importantly, want to feel connected, whether it's to God, they want to feel connection to nature, creation, the environment. What word I'll give you whatever word you want. They want to feel a sense of connection to the wider or broader humanity, the sense of human family, the cosmos, or they want to feel a sense of connection with the spirit, this undefined, maybe sense of creativity and life-giving energy, whatever. It doesn't even have to be defined. But the people who have those strong yearnings and the strong sense of something beyond, something more, often call themselves spiritual. And we can argue about whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, or if it's too undefined. But I just want to start with the assumption that given that we're so divided and polarized, and given that the world is so messy as it is, I think that desire for connection, that spiritual impulse, can be a rather profound tool that I'm not sure we're utilizing when we talk about the public good, when we talk about these big, broad questions. So easily right now, I think the discourse is an us versus them. Sometimes that goes by the phrase of tribalism. People want to talk about, a set of beliefs or a set of practices that makes them conservative or liberal. A different name could be used, or they're in this movement or that movement, where it's easy to define an us and a them. And that seems to be tearing apart a greater sense of national unity, or a tearing apart a sense of even like an ability for compassion and empathy. But that desire, at least in spirituality, shows that there's something that's more profound in us, that's deeper in us somewhere, whether it's driven by our biology or implanted by God. There's this something about our complicated creatureliness as humans that yearns for a connection. It yearns for a connection to something more. And so I really think that today, if we can begin to talk to each other about that desire and need, we can start mending some fences or building some bridges. So listen, let me talk to you about a few of the divisions that are out there of the way we think, and show how maybe some spirituality is offered an alternative vision. Because really, what I'm really talking about, it's the way we hold the world in our imaginations. Okay? Here's an example. We imagine that the world is a world of humans and a world of nature. And then that world of humans we might call culture, right? It's the world where human society creates laws, art, and customs, and all that. And it's the world of religion. It's the world where God has made all things. And for the Judeo-Christian belief, it's where God has made humanity in the image of God, thus making humanity special and different. And then over there, somewhere we can point to, is the world of nature. And in the 20th and 21st century, we might call it the environment, but it's the world of nature. And in a spiritual way, we might call it creation. But what we're referring to is the world of things. It's the world of animals and plants, and it's the world of rocks and landscapes. And in a capitalist society or in an industrial society, it's the world of resources,
Right.
The thing that can be used for the sake of the world of humans and the world of culture. Now, that divide, I think is actually demonstrably wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just think it's a bad understanding. First off, what does it? Does it denaturalizes humanity? So like humans are part of nature. We're a naturally occurring thing on the planet. Or to put in theological terms, humans are creatures. We're creatures. So nature is really something you can't point to. I mean, you are part of, so you can't just point to it as something that's different from you. You're it. And it goes even further than that, but it in a way devalues other animal life. It says, well, humans are special and animals aren't special. And we try to figure out why, besides saying that humans are rational. Well, science is showing us every day that certain animals have rationality. They have an ability to reason. Sperm whales sing, and that singing travels miles and miles and miles, and it calls them to come and protect them when they're being attacked. I mean, there's a rationality involved. There's a community that is being involved. We even believe some animals laugh and have language. This is blowing the minds of researchers right now, and it should blow all of our minds. But like the fact that sperm whales' brains are so much larger than ours, and their language may be thousands of years older than ours, maybe even more. Maybe if we ever figured out what they were saying, we would be shocked by what they know.
Right.
So it's wrong to break up the world like that. And I understand why we do it. It makes thinking easy, right? Well, this is the world of culture. This is the world of humans. And this is where we make up laws and rules, and we have fashion, and we have art, and we have etiquette. And over there, that's the world it's nature. It's wild. It doesn't have morality over there. Nature's red and tooth and claw, said Tennyson. It's violent. Whatever actually happened within the imagination that created those worlds, the way the world was seen as two separate spheres, is on the side of that human world, on the side of culture, became the concept of civilized culture, or the European culture, and maleness. And on the side of nature over there, well, that's where we put indigenous cultures, indigenous Africans, and the indigenous Native Americans, and other places in the world. And if they're on the side of nature and things, then they are quite easily made into objects themselves. Quite easily they can be sold into slavery. And those places become fields of resources for culture, because they always serve the culture, the human world. Oh, what's interesting, besides the fact that indigenous folks land on that side, is that's where we put the female, Mother Nature. Female becomes subservient. So now, this is a very modern, rationalistic, Enlightenment understanding, but it's really shaped the way we see the world. It's just split the world in two, and it's grouped things on categories and sides. And because of that, it's made us very, I guess, simpletons in the way we navigate the world. And because of that, we can walk around the world and we can rape, pillage, and destroy and justify it. Let me ask you this: is this just getting too in the weeds, or what do you think about what I'm saying?
So everything that you've said reminds me of two things that I've read over the last couple of years. You're reminding me of them, so I don't have the things in front of me to be able to reference and be precise with it, but I'll try to give you the gist of what I remember. There are two stories I want to repeat back to you and get your thoughts on. The first one has to do with a story I read about a beached whale in Australia and an Aboriginal community that found the whale. They started tearing apart the whale and eating it because that's what you do, I suppose, when you have an abundance of food. But very quickly, in the process of trying to eat this whale, they realized that it was going to go bad because they didn't have any way to refrigerate parts of it or whatever. And so rather than smoking it or trying to preserve it in some way so that they would have more food for the future, they contacted all the other local Aboriginal tribes, and everybody met up on this beach for a big party. Let's eat this whale together, my friends. And what I love about that story is it's this sense of an abundance, and therefore the abundance creating community. And I think that this is part of human nature, is to share when we have abundance. But conversely, I read this other story a while back. It had to do with something called the Robbers Cave Experiment, and it's subtitled Realistic Conflict Theory. And what happened was this team of researchers got a group of boys together and basically segmented them into as even of teams of personalities as they could, so that both teams had essentially the same kinds of resources in terms of the people, the kids involved. And then their plan was to create in-groups within the two different teams very gradually so that they could see at what point tribalism occurred. And they didn't have to get very far. Like, they thought they were going to, begin with putting them on the two different teams, and then they were going to challenge the resources. Like maybe one team would have water and the other team would get Gatorade or something for when they were participating in sports activities. And then in the next event, they would create an additional difference between the two teams, so on and so forth, until they found the point at which two groups of people began to conflict in terms of tribalism. What the researchers found was tribalism occurred at the very beginning. Like, as soon as they separated the boys in the two teams, and I don't remember exactly how there was a differentiation. I think it was like different colored jerseys or something. Like, one had blue jerseys and the other had green jerseys or something. But at the point in time when they just separated the two teams, tribalism had occurred because there was an us versus them mentality already just by nature of separating the two groups of people. And it devolved into name-calling and bullying almost instantaneously without them even having to go the extra mile to create more problems. So the question in my mind is, which one of these experiences actually demonstrates our nature, and what can we do to try to get to the feeling of connection as opposed to the feeling of difference?
That's a great question, and that's a very clarifying question. Throughout the modern period, that's like there's this back and forth on what human nature is. You do have Hobbes who's saying we're bellum omnium contra omnis, war of all against all. You have that Hobbesian perspective that Marshall Salins talks about, that for him goes through Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, through Hobbes, through John Adams, right into American style democracy. And then on the other side, you have this romantic vein of the modern movement, which is Rousseau, and the man of nature is this kind of golden version of the primal society, right? That we're noble, and it's society itself with all of its all of its just indulgent sort of ways that have corrupted our desires and impulses. And it's like a back and forth argument in philosophy and in politics. And, obviously I think the Hobbesian version kind of wins our social imagination. Although if you really look at the 19th century in America, there's a robust movement of groups that try to start utopian societies. I mean, there's towns called New Harmony all over the place. There's all these attempts at these, and I think there's showing that Rousseau's vision is in there. It's present within religious traditions and other things. And and in the world of Christian theology or Christian religious thought, even from people who don't believe yet study it, there is the question of whether the world's original blessing or original fall, like what's first? Is first the first thing of the world nature, and or the first part of nature, is it violence? Is violence is absolutely present within the world. I mean, not even just human violence. I'm talking about for things to survive, other things die. The food you eat is a sacrifice. Or so is the picture an original gift, or is it original violence? And it goes, there's all kinds of arguments along the way. I think theologically, how I've often understood it is that no matter where you start, you have to start with the idea that everything in its origin is blessed as a gift. So before there's even violence, there's gift. There is a being, and being itself is good. And so, boom, it first starts as peace, or first starts as gift, or whatnot. Yet we cannot deny the fact, biologically speaking, that we compete, and that's part of it. And there's something even beautiful about some of that that takes place within our natural capacity. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we're to be distinct as creatures in any way, well, theologically we'd say, yes, that's the image of God, but, from the Christian and Jewish point of view, but what does that look like in a more broad sense? Well, maybe it doesn't mean we're the only rational creatures. Maybe it doesn't mean we're the only creatures with humor. Some have surmised over time that we're the only creatures that are communal, but we don't believe that's true any longer. Dolphins create society, and whales, different creatures create society. So communal nature is different. One thinker suggested that humans are the animals that create their own worlds. They're able to go against instinct more than other animals, and to create rules and laws and stuff that go against our instinct. Now, maybe we can see that in the animal kingdom. What I can say is nothing else in the animal kingdom has been able to create worlds at the level that we've been able to create them. And they haven't been able to destroy worlds at the level that we've been able to destroy them. In the world of spirituality, Christian spirituality, but it's also other spiritualities. First off, there's the yearning for connection, but then there's the I would say the calling for connection. We once again see that all things are already connected in source and in end. So if it's true that all things are created, then that means we're all like this family of creation created in the source. That means we've all come from the same place. In Hebrew scriptures, you say that Adam was born of the dust. Right? Adam and Adamah. Adam is humanity. Adamah is dirt. It's the same word, basically. So Adam is from the dust. There's this ontological or sense of our being is connected to the stuff of creation. Science backs us up now. Poetically, scientists have said there's stardust in our veins.
Right.
The human language, or the modern English language, reminds us that the word human and humus, are the same root word. So, the human is from the humus of the earth. And another word with the same root is humility, which suggests how we ought to behave because of it. Like, we are also radically linked. In certain Native American traditions, there is the extending of kinfolk relationships to animals. We've seen in movies, or we've heard stories about thanking the life of a kill in a hunt, right? There's something very genuine about that. And so there are these traditions, and it's not just Christian or Jewish. It's like I said, Native American and many other Eastern traditions as well, that deeply tie us together once more. And if we start breaking down the things that divide and remind us that is, at least in our being, we're connected, then we can have a better, more empathetic way to engage. But today we have tribalism. It's everywhere. Political tribalism, religious tribalism. Religious traditions can't get away from tribalizing within the broader umbrella of itself. I mean, we find ways of using and theming each other. I moved from the Midwest to the Southeast 10 years ago, and there is college football tribalism, and I've seen people get into significant fights over who they cheer for, right? I mean,
it's preposterously even down to fandom tribalism at this point for fictional characters.
All right, give me an example of a fictional character that you're talking about.
Good grief. Star Wars versus Star Trek, Marvel versus DC.
Well, I mean, obviously Star Wars is better. And obviously Marvel is better in the films, but DC was better with the character development.
Lord of the Rings versus Harry Potter.
We all know that Dumbledore's a ripoff of
Right.
right. Yeah, yeah, and I was just watching the Brat Pack documentary the other day, and they talked about Team Ducky and remember all those I was Team so isn't there a vampire movie? It's a Mormon vampire show. That's a Twilight. Are you
Right.
team
Right.
team Edward, team I can't even remember, but yes, I heard these phrases. You're exactly right. In fandoms, we have found ways to split and try ways. Now, is it fun and interesting to have a team that competes with another team? Yes. And I think there's probably spirituality wrapped up in the concept of play.
Sure.
And we could talk about that in another episode, but as far down as that goes in us, it gets dangerous. I mean, in the context of sport for just one moment, if I can just kind of go off on a rabbit trail,
Please.
my understanding is in our brain development, we don't have kind of an area, or we don't have the neural pathways to deal with the loss of our favorite team in a significant sporting event. We don't have area that says, oh, my team lost the Super Bowl, or the SEC did not win the national championship or World Series or what have you. But what gets stimulated in our brain is the same center that is activated by genuine grief. We can make fun of people for going over the top about their sports teams, but when we're talking on a cognitive level, people grief stimulated, you can understand. So I think that the spiritual concept of connection, the spiritual concept of seeing our relationship to not just things and creation or other beings, but to the human beings, can help override some of those more base biological tendencies.
Sure.
I mean, let's just talk about prejudice for a moment.
Sure.
I mean, I believe that we can't be colorblind. As it was popular when I was growing up to say you were colorblind if you wanted to say you weren't racist. Well, that's a silly thing. I mean, to be colorblind literally and not be able to see race means that in some way you have to really ignore what your visual cues are telling you. And I mean, you do by evolution, by observation, you do note the differences in people. And it is not as always profound as skin tone. I mean, once we start talking about people who look much more alike, we find more nuanced ways of dividing. And I think all that supposedly comes from, as far as I understand, a very tribalistic evolutionary thing. It's important to identify the other. And at some point in human history, that's really important. As if we have a tribe that's competing for scarce resources on the prairie, and there's another tribe that's competing for the same resources, someone's coming into our camp to steal or to take or to harm, it's important to notice the differences. So biologically, we do notice difference, and it makes us more, it poises us to be put in a position of prejudice. But when we follow that spiritual teaching, our spiritual value of connecting based on the fact that we have a shared origin, that what divides us is so little compared to what unites us, that maybe we have a shared unity of purpose or a same destiny, or all these different ways of thinking about connecting. Then what we can do is we start thinking beyond that first impulse. We start reevaluating how we otherize or demonize or push someone to a boundary and say, I wonder what of them is like me. That begins to grow, and we begin to see people. We're able to see the person who's angry with us and not go, they're so awful, they're so evil, they're so bad, get them away from me. We begin to think questions like, I wonder what is bothering them today. I wonder what tragedy they're facing. I wonder what they haven't said. Because you know yourself that you are affected by the world, and life's hard, and you carry things, and maybe when you aren't at your best, you've been harsh to someone else. And so you're able to see things with empathy because you started from that desire of connection. And that this impulse is seen in spiritual traditions and philosophies and all kinds of practices. I'm thinking of one of the most profound historical attempts at this was the work of Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela in South Africa, facing not only apartheid, but then Mandela himself having been sentenced to prison for so many years in a whatever 8 by 12 foot cell. They both, in their activism against apartheid and their seeking justice against the injustice and their unification of a country and a people, they both leaned on an African philosophical principle called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu was very famously even utilized by the famous basketball coach Doc Rivers when he coached the Celtics, because the thing about it, it can have this rich heritage. Because it's rich in truth, it also works. And so let me explain a little bit about what it was, and I'll show how, I mean, it even worked to help unify a basketball team. But Ubuntu is this idea that because you are, I am. In the West, we're taught to see the world differently. We're taught to see the world as I am, me, and then I define the world out from me. It's individualism. Like I draw the circle around me, and then I work outward from there. Now, we may be individuals, but for Ubuntu and for people in pre-modern societies who saw the world in more kinfolk style relations, that they would say, like, I am an individual, or I have my identity because of the community. I am because you are. You, the community, my ancestors, my generations, my family, my friends, you make me and give me my identity. So it's a social identity in as much as it is an individual identity that works its way outward. Right now, I feel like we are, we in our society have prioritized the individual so strongly that we have cut away community in a deleterious way. So right now, it's like you do you is a very, very important thing for people to say. And I sympathize and empathize with people who are looking to validate their inner life. Like there's something about that seems holy. Like you have uniqueness about you. Absolutely. But once you sever that uniqueness away from a broader community, you also lose so many rich resources and relationships.
Right.
And I feel like right now, this generation that's coming up is the most identified generation in the world. They have 100,000 labels for everything. We just keep categorizing to oblivion.
Sure.
I think the impulse to be your unique self is wonderful, but I don't think it needs to happen at the exclusion of your tradition, your community, the people around you, because for better, for worse, that shapes you. For better, for worse, it gives you your uniqueness. So they work together. Ubuntu understood that. So Doc Rivers used that for his basketball team. You know, like as we're playing on the floor, it's incredible to remind yourselves that like that's how reliant you are on each other. It's solidarity building to talk about. Sure. Now, what Doc Rivers did is used it to then tribalize his team against other teams. But that's effective for sport, and that's the place for it.
Right.
But so that there's an example of seeking deeper connection and solidarity. Marshall Salins is this anthropologist who worked at the University of Chicago, and he wrote this book that has just deeply inspired me called "The Western Illusion of Human Nature." He talks in it about how the Western illusion of human nature, the Western vision of human nature, is that we are brutes. And we are selfish, and we're just going to take and hurt other people unless we have Leviathan or a government, a big social contract on top of us that keep us in check. And this is Hobbes and John Adams, and it comes from Thucydides and the Peloponnesian Wars and all this Greek thought. And he traces all these ideas, and who touches on them. It's the reason why John Adams proposed a three-system government in America. Judicial, legislative, and executive. You need one to quell the other before getting too big, right? At all times, because that's what naturally we do. That's according to Hobbes. Salin says, is that really who we are? Because there's countless other societies around the world that still live today that function on kinship. Like, what they see in another person is an extension of themselves, not simply another individual who's defined opposed to us and in their uniqueness, but that even a friend in the tribe or just an acquaintance is an extension of me.
Right.
They're more like cousin or like a brother, like the extended version of self. And that kinship can even extend into the animal kingdom. Well, that world exists too. So is it the case that the Western vision of humanity describes us, or does it prescribe us? Does it tell us who to be?
Right.
I think it's probably very nuanced in there. I think there's probably a tendency in humanity to take and to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of us, but I think there's also a strong part of us that is also cooperative and peaceful and desiring to connect. And probably I would lean to that being the greater sum of us than the other. In the Holy Communion theology put forward by a Catholic theologian, William Kavanaugh, he goes to John's gospel where Jesus says, whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood, I abide in them and they abide in me. So what he says is, when you eat and drink the body and blood of Christ, when you consume it, you yourself are consumed into the body of Christ. The body of Christ is another name for not just the bread, but the church.
Right.
And so when we eat and drink in honor of Jesus in that way, we are consumed ourselves more deeply into the body of Christ. So that when we're eating and drinking with others, we're saying to each other, our fates are bound together.
Mm-hmm.
Your success becomes my success, my failure becomes your failure. In another tradition, there it is. This desire and longing for connectivity, a radical empathy, passion, a solidarity. So it troubles me just in our world when we hear politicians, public figures, I guess use language, weaponize theology, weaponize spirituality to otherize each other. It certainly is. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm going on and on, but it certainly is the case that the most expedient way to get people to join you is to have a common enemy.
Right.
But isn't that like one of the most immature and like, isn't it the least sophisticated thing to do?
Sure.
Like, isn't good leadership desired? And wouldn't good leadership do better than that?
Agreed. Try to unify.
Yeah. Try to unify on something, not against something.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. It is hard, but that's the spiritual impulse. I think that's there. And like they would say in the perennial tradition, it's like, it's through the spiritual traditions of the world. And so I think that's just an underutilized tool, however we express it, whether we want to use Ubuntu or Eucharistic theology or kinfolk or kin style relationships in anthropology. It is something there that is trying to bridge the otherness. But because of that, because we realize that the human race is larger than our tribe or a collection of tribes, and the more we've expanded our understanding of the size of the planet, that means our awareness has to expand to the level of morality. That means, so everything has to expand with and grows together. So our awareness expands, and so does our moral imagination. And so I think that while it is true that when we put our red jerseys and blue jerseys on people, we're gonna start talking at base biological levels against each other. We're going to be competitive. I think the most healthy thing for us to do is to acknowledge that that's part of it, and play in competition is not inherently bad. But the deeper need to belong to each other, the deeper need to rely on each other, the fact even to eat a salad for lunch today means that certain life forms died so that I could eat.
Yep.
I'm still going to eat. I still have to survive, but to acknowledge that is a way that draws me more profoundly, morally, and I would say relationally into the life of something else. That moral imagination should continue to grow. It's not just an acknowledgement. The awareness is there, but my moral imagination needs to grow. I probably, if I'm going to acknowledge the sacrifice of a food item, I need to then think about, well, did that animal that I'm going to consume, Or did that plant that I'm going to consume, was it raised well and healthy? Did it flourish as it lived? Or was it treated like a slave? Was it treated like an object that had no value other than whatever I want it for? Was it given a harsh existence? I think that moral question should then change the way I think about how I consume food. And that can apply now to the way we think about other people. The more we go and realize that in this world, we're going to compete, then we start to go, okay, my view has gone from this one region to a collection of regions to a nation to now a hemisphere to now the whole globe. And we can look at, with Carl Sagan, at that picture back of Earth is that little pale blue dot and see that we're on that all small planet, right? We go, okay, the borders and boundaries we've made are made up. We're all born the same way. We all go in and out of this world with the same needs, and that we rely on others for every moment of our survival. And even if I don't rely on someone across the world for my survival right now, we are like creatures that rely on each other for survival. So my imagination needs to expand to include them. The devices of our own human making have grown in such a way as to erase boundaries and borders, to erase the imaginary boundaries and borders we've already made. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say there? So our whatever abilities we have that animals don't, we can create and destroy worlds with the tools and the systems we built in place. And those things kind of reveal that the boundaries that we make that divide us they're already just made up boundaries in the first place. What we've created makes us now have to think about people far away from us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that it's a subtle holding together of two things that can be true at the same time, that we are competitive and we find ways to have greater intimacy with some over others, and proximity almost always defines that. And that may not always be bad, but we need to reason beyond that tribal level, because we're no longer in a social tribal world. Mm-hmm. So the tools of spirituality can become a help to our brain development, which is still sometimes locked into an era of the world that we have gone beyond in terms of our cultural and technological capabilities.